The Bronte sisters did not just write masterpieces, they pulled off one of the greatest literary disguises in history. Hello and welcome. Today we're stepping into one of the most intriguing mysteries in literature history, the Bronte sisters and their secret identity. Charlotte, Emily and Anne did not just simply publish their novels, they hid behind the names Currer, Ellis and Acton Bell. But why? Was it about safety, acceptance, or simply getting their work read? How did they come up with these names and how long did they manage to keep the truth hidden? In this video, we will unravel the story of these famous pseudonyms. We're going to explore the real dangers and prejudice the sisters faced as women writers in the Victorian era. And imagine what it must have felt like to live this double life, creating these powerful and passionate novels, while the world believed the authors were actually men. So stay with me because this is a tale of secrecy, courage and cleverness that still fascinate readers today. So I'm out and about today. It's not as warm today as it has been. I really feel like autumn is just about to come around the corner. It's a bit cooler. You might hear some background noise. I think it's a tractor or something, some farm machinery happening over there. So yeah, do stick with me and we'll tough it out together. Feeling a bit chillier today. I want my summer back. In May 1846, the Bronte sisters took their first step into the publishing world, but not as Charlotte, Emily and Anne as we know them. Instead, they became Currer, Ellis and Acton Bell, three rather mysterious sounding gentlemen. Their first book, Poems by Currer, Ellis and Acton Bell, was self-published at their own expense. This wasn't mere playfulness, it was a deliberate act of self-protection. Women writers weren't exactly rare, but their work was often treated as curiosities rather than taken seriously. Books by women could be dismissed as sentimental and frivolous and trivial, and the sisters wanted their work judged on their own merits rather than the gender of the authors. Charlotte later explained, "Adverse to personal publicity, we veiled our own names. We did not like to declare ourselves women. We had a vague impression that authoresses are liable to be looked on with prejudice. We had noticed how critics sometimes use for their chastisement the weapon of personality." That statement shows they weren't just avoiding bias, they were protecting themselves from the deeply personal, often critical nature of Victorian criticism. In today's world, it's easy to take privacy for granted. We have ways to do that. But in the Brontes' day, public attention could be shocking and damaging. The pseudonyms were a shield, and they also protected the family's reputation. Their father, Patrick Bronte, was the Currer of Haworth, and any scandal at all, even literary, could reflect poorly on him. Firstly, the pseudonyms gave them creative freedom. Could Emily have published Wuthering Heights under her own name without sort of facing scorn for writing about cruelty, violence and obsession? Could Anne have released The Tenant in Wildfowl Hall with its frank depiction of alcoholism, domestic abuse and marital breakdown without being branded unwomanly and improper? Behind the names Currer, Ellis and Acton Bell, they could write their stories they wanted to tell, free from societal constraints. That was freedom. One of the most fascinating things about the Bronte sisters' pseudonym is how carefully they were chosen. Each sister kept that first letter of their real name. So we have Charlotte became Currer Bell, Emily became Ellis Bell, and Anne became Acton Bell. It gave them a sense of connection to their own identity, even while writing under a mask. There was also a practical reason for this secrecy early on. The only way Charlotte and Anne could persuade Emily to contribute to the poems was by agreeing to her firm conditions. They must never, ever reveal their true names. Emily insisted that her identity remain hidden, and this was the deal. Without it, she would not allow her work to be published. They also chose names that could be passed as either male or female. Very clever. This wasn't an accident. That moment of doubt. Is the author male or female? Who knows? I mean, it allows their novels to be judged on the story itself rather than dismissed simply because a woman had written them. Charlotte explained that they didn't like to declare themselves women because authoresses were often treated with prejudice, which you can imagine. I mean, they were praised in ways that weren't true praise or criticised for their personalities rather than their work, which just felt so wrong to her. The actual names themselves hold intriguing clues. Charlotte's Currer may have been inspired by Francis Richardson Currer, the wealthy Yorkshire philanthropist. It's actually Frances Mary Richardson Currer. And to start off with, I thought this was a man because I missed off the Mary section of her name. This isn't a remarkable man. This is a very remarkable Yorkshire woman. She owned more than 20,000 books in her library. I mean, that is amazing. And of course, she earned a reputation as one of the greatest female book collectors in Europe. No wonder Charlotte chose her name, whose library was legendary and whose generosity supported local institutes, including the clergy's daughters' school at Cowan Bridge, where the Brontes had studied. Not that they enjoyed it. Interestingly, Branwell had already used the name Currer in a story he wrote in 1838, so the name was already familiar in the family. Emily's Ellis was also a recognised Yorkshire name. The Ellis family were prominent mill owners in nearby Bingley, and Ellis Cunliffe Lister Kay was the Liberal MP for Bradford after the Reform Bill. And all of this kept Ellis in the sort of Bronte's mind as a strong and local recognisable name. Anne's Acton is a little bit more mysterious, but it was probably familiar from her time working as a governess in Thorpe Green, where this was a local name. But later, writers have suggested links to the poet Eliza Acton, though we can't be sure. And the surname Bell? We can't be completely sure about that either. I mean, some theories link it to good old Arthur Bell Nichols, Patrick's curate, who later went on to marry Charlotte. Others point to the new peal of bells at Haworth Church, installed in 1845, just as the sisters were preparing their pseudonyms. But a bell is simple, it's strong, it's easy to remember, and it's a perfect symbol. A call to attention for three sisters determined to make readers sit up and listen. But whatever the exact inspiration, the results was a perfect blend of the personal, the local, and the deliberate mysterious. Names that gave nothing away, yet held meaning in every letter. The symmetry between them created a secret bond that still echoes today. After their first volume, Poems by Currer, Ellis and Acton Bell, failed to make much of a mark, the sisters didn't let that stop them. Oh no! If anything, it kind of spurred them on. They knew their stories were stronger than a few indifferent reviews, and they were determined to keep writing. Each sister began preparing her novel and finally sending the manuscripts out under the same mysterious name, Bell. Charlotte worked on The Professor, Emily on Wuthering Heights, and Anne polished up Agnes Grey. The poems may have been overlooked, but the sisters were learning. I mean, they knew now how the literary world worked, and they were clever enough to protect themselves while doing it. Every submission was wrapped in this secrecy, and every parcel sent carried quiet tension. They were stepping into this unknown, yet they did so boldly, knowing the Bell name gave them that freedom. Even when Charlotte's The Professor didn't hit the mark with the publishers, Charlotte did not give up. Oh no. She sent Jane Eyre soon after, confident in her story, confident in that Bell identity. And this time, yay, success followed. The novels were published, readers were captivated, and curiosity grew. Who were the Bells? The sisters' secret only sort of added to the fascination. I mean, think about what they were doing. 3 women from a remote Yorkshire village sending tales of passion and cruelty and obsession and moral struggles into the hands of these London publishers under male pseudonyms. And they were keeping it a secret from almost everyone they knew. The pressure must have been enormous, yet they carried on. Anonymity allowed them to write fearlessly, to explore themes that would have scandalised their neighbours if attached to their real names, and to test the limits of their creativity. I mean, it's remarkable when you pause and you think. The combination of courage, cleverness and persistence that carried the Bells from a quiet little poetry volume to the novels that would become classic English literature. They were writing boldly, hidden behind this mask and setting the stage for literary history. This feather has just blown in to this little porch that I'm sat in. I wonder if it's a symbol, because they say, or is it a white feather, that if you find a feather, I might think it might be a white feather, that someone who's died is thinking of you. I don't know. Let me know. I don't know if I've got that right, or whether that's something I've made up over the years. But yeah, it just flew in, just landed on me. I think it's a pigeon feather. At first, the Bronte sisters were determined that no one, and I mean no one, should know who the mysterious Bells really were. Not even their closest friends like Ellen Nussey were told. They didn't even confide in the rest of their family. That's how guarded they were. Charlotte, not surprisingly, took the lead in handling all the correspondences with the publishers. She kept the author's pseudonym separate from her own identity, creating this kind of protective barrier between their quiet lives in Haworth and, of course, their professional world of publishing in London. Proofs for the novels started arriving at their home, and inevitably small mistakes began to occur. On the 28th of March 1846, Charlotte wrote to her publishers explaining proofs had hitherto always come under the direction of C. Bronte Esquire, but that a little mistake had happened the day before, and she thought it best to have them sent more carefully in future. I mean, the thought of her father or Branwell opening their letters and their parcels for the Bells was unthinkable. I mean, Branwell was living at home at that time, and the sisters had good reason to keep him uninvolved. I mean, he was in a difficult place personally, and they wanted to protect him from additional stress or disappointment. Whether Branwell teased them about the arriving parcels or simply just noticed them, the sisters' carefully maintained privacy could easily have felt under threat. For Charlotte and her sisters, every proof, every letter, every small slip carried that quiet anxiety of discovery. If their authorship became known too soon, it could influence how their work was received, or even whether future books would be accepted at all. The stakes were high, and the tension of keeping such a closely guarded secret weighed heavily on them all, I'm sure. By 1848, the whispers had started. The sisters had been careful, almost obsessively, about guarding their secret, but rumours have a way of growing legs, and in the literary world of the day, speculation could have just been as powerful as fact. The tipping point came when Thomas Courtly Newby, the publisher of Emily's Wuthering Heights and Anne's Agnes Grey, and then of course later Tenant of Wildfire Hall, marked one of Anne's novels to an American publisher as the latest work of Currer Bell. I mean, this caused real confusion because Smith, Elder & Co., Charlotte's publishers, were expecting Currer Bell's next novel and were alarmed, as they would be, by the suggestion that all 3 works might be by the same author. The sisters did not share that same publisher, so this marketing twist threatened to expose their carefully guarded secret. And Charlotte knew that it needed sorting out quickly and face to face. Charlotte decided that a personal visit to London was necessary to set the record straight. Emily was strongly against the idea. No surprise. She was deeply anxious, worried that their carefully maintained anonymity might be blown and dreaded the upheaval of leaving Haworth for the noisy, overwhelming streets of London. Anne, however, accompanied Charlotte both for support and because she understood the urgency. It was a huge step for two quiet, reserved women from a remote Yorkshire village stepping into the heart of this publishing world run by men. When they arrived at the offices of Smith and Elder, Charlotte asked to see George Smith, the man who had been corresponding with Currer Bell, obviously for years. I mean, she handed him this letter addressed to that name, and he looked at it, then looked at her, then back at the letter again, completely baffled. I mean, slowly the penny must have dropped. Standing there, pale-faced and nervous, Charlotte finally said the words, "Miss Bronte." Imagine that moment. Oh, I'd love to be there. That mild-looking, tiny Yorkshire woman revealing herself to the author of Jane Eyre. It must have been quite a shock. But even then, Charlotte wasn't ready for the whole world to know. She made it so clear to Smith that to everyone else, they would remain gentlemen as before. The secret might have been shared with one more person, but the game was not yet over. So I found myself a bench at last. You know me, I do love a bench. And it's warm enough to sit on it without my carrier bag to keep my bottom warm, so that's good. But I've sat on many benches over my time filming, so I wonder how many. I should add it up, shouldn't I? I should work it out. Try to think. But anyway, this one's quite nice. It's very warm because it's been in the sun. Living under a false name might sound exciting in theory, but in practice it carried this heavy emotional weight. Imagine constantly watching what you say, double checking every letter, worrying that a simple slip of the pen could give the whole game away. That sort of pressure builds over time, and for Charlotte it must have been quietly exhausting. I mean, she'd wanted to be an author for years, dreaming of writing books that would be read and respected. And now she finally was. But there was a bitter twist. She couldn't fully bask in her success. I mean, the world did not know Charlotte Bronte, of course. They just knew Currer Bell. And the praise, the admiration, the curiosity, all of that went to her pseudonym. Currer Bell was the rising star, the great author alongside her literary idols, while poor Charlotte remained in the shadows, back in Haworth. One can only imagine the complex mix of pride and frustration this must have stirred in her. Charlotte later admitted that anonymity had given her something precious, a sort of creative shield. As she wrote, "I think if a good fairy were to offer me the choice of a gift, I would say, grant me the power to walk invisible, accompanied by the grace never to abuse the privilege." It's such a striking phrase. I mean, the power to walk invisible. And you can feel how much that privacy did mean to her. Yet there's a clear paradox here. Writing as Currer Bell gave her courage. It allowed her to be bolder, more daring, more herself on the page than perhaps she felt she could be as Charlotte Bronte. But at the same time, it kept her in a kind of isolation. Few people could share in her triumphs, fewer still in her struggles. I mean, carrying both the thrill and the loneliness of the secret must have been a strain, and revealing it, when the moment finally came, was bound to be just as unsettling as it was liberating. Charlotte had promised her sisters, especially Emily, that she would never reveal their identity as the Bells. Emily was absolutely determined that their truth should never be revealed. And Charlotte, steadfast, kept this promise even to close friends like Ellen Nussey. After Emily and Anne's death, Charlotte was left with the weight of the secret alone. She had no one to share the burden with, no one to truly understand the complexities of the dual identity. This isolation must have deepened her sense of loneliness and perhaps even guilt for not having been able to share the success with her sisters. Charlotte's father, Patrick Bronte, were unaware of her authorship until after the publication of Jane Eyre. In January 1848, between the publication of Jane Eyre and the arrival of Wuthering Heights and Agnes Grey, Charlotte sought out her father in his study after his usual solitary dinner with a copy of a novel to show him and one or two of her reviews, Patrick was reportedly shocked, but also proud of his daughter's accomplishments. I mean, it's possible Charlotte chose to tell him to reassure him that she could support herself and could manage financially, easing any worries he might have had about her. Branwell, however, was never told, likely because Charlotte and his sisters wanted to protect him from further distress, given his personal struggles at the time. The knowledge of their literary success and that independence might have been an additional burden he just could not manage. In Victorian England, an author was judged almost as much by their name as by their writing. A woman's name on the title page carried a weight of assumptions, and rarely flattering ones. Women were often thought to lack seriousness, depth, or ability to tackle important subjects. Their work could be dismissed as sentimental, trivial, or overly emotional, and critics sometimes wrote with a polite but cutting condescension that had little to do with the quality of their writing itself. By publishing under masculine names, the Brontes could sidestep that bias entirely. Currer, Ellis and Acton Bell could be taken seriously as literary voices in their own right without being prejudged as just women writers. Their work could stand on its own, judged by the content and the craft rather than the gender of the author. This anonymity, I can't say it, gave them the freedom to be bold, to explore different themes and to push the boundaries of what a woman writer could address. Yet Charlotte later reflected on how fragile the shield really was. Maintaining the secret carried its own pressure, the constant vigilance, the careful handling of correspondence, like we said, and the fear of forever making a small slip. It could unravel everything. Anonymity offered protection, but it came with a heavy emotional weight, a tension between freedom and isolation. Some women authors at the time, like Elizabeth Barrett Browning or Margaret Oliphant, chose to publish under their own names, and they gained recognition, certainly, but they also faced scrutiny, criticism, and societal judgment that could sometimes overshadow their work. For the Brontes, adopting the Bell pseudonym meant they avoided much of that. They allowed their novels to be taken seriously and, perhaps most importantly, giving them the chance to tell the stories they wanted to tell, unencumbered by prejudice and men. I often try to imagine the sheer strain of living that double life. Writing letters to publishers, arranging contracts and negotiating every detail, all while maintaining this absolute secrecy. It must have been exhausting. The thrill of seeing their work in print and receiving praise must have been shadowed by the constant gnawing question, has anyone guessed? I can almost picture Charlotte lying awake at night, running through conversations in her mind and wondering if she'd slipped, if someone had noticed, or a flicker of recognition. And then there's that moment when she finally told George Smith the truth. The relief must have been enormous. To speak freely, to drop that disguise, it must have felt like taking a deep breath after holding it for so long. But at the same time, it would have been bittersweet, because in that instant, the magic of Currer, Ellis and Acton Bell had gone forever. The secret that they guarded so fiercely could never be reclaimed. I mean, what complicates this further is that the secrecy was never watertight. Some people close to Charlotte had already begun to guess. Ellen Nussey, her oldest friend, wrote to her in 1848 after hearing rumours that Charlotte might be Currer Bell. Charlotte's reply was firm and very to the point, saying, "Believe me, Ellen, I have not written a word. The author of the book is no friend of mine, and I beg you never to ascribe it to me." Her words show both how her anxiety over the secrecy and the care with which she sought to shield their identities. But it wasn't just a casual denial. In other correspondences, when Ellen pressed the point, Charlotte snapped back, insisting no one had the right to affirm or hint at her publishing. She wrote that she would own none of the 20 books ascribed to her and emphasised that profound obscurity was indefinitely preferable to vulgar notoriety. I mean, poor Charlotte was in this impossible situation, bound by her promise to Emily to protect their authorship, whilst placing Ellen in this awkward position of spreading a lie. Every insistence that Ellen had her confidence and yet had to deny the truth was, in hindsight, a little cruel. If the secret ever got out, Ellen would be publicly humiliated. I mean, it was her friend. Mary Taylor, another close friend, was treated differently. Charlotte sent her a copy of Jane Eyre from afar, perhaps hinting at the truth in a subtle way. I mean, receiving it in New Zealand, Mary quickly realised only Charlotte could have written it. Distance may have made it safer for Charlotte to hint at the truth, offering her a small release from that immense pressure she carried alone. Mary had access to not only Jane Eyre, but also Wuthering Heights and Agnes Grey, and she could compare the three works. She commented on Charlotte's imagination, the lack of moralising and the clever targeting of a higher class of readers, contrasting it with Emily's and Anne's approaches. Though through Mary, Charlotte could share her experiences, discuss the publication process and confide in a way that would have been impossible with Ellen, whose proximity and suspicions made the conversation fraught. And then there's Emily. From the very beginning, her desire for privacy had been absolute. To be known publicly was her greatest dread, and she relied on her sister to keep that promise. When Charlotte revealed the truth to George Smith, it wasn't only her secret she exposed. Emily's was at stake too. I mean, the thought that the veil could be torn away must have caused Emily real unease. And Charlotte, well, she must have felt the burden of protecting her at the same time as sort of navigating her own revelation. Anne too must have felt pressure, especially considering the explosive nature of the tenant of Wildfire Hall. I mean, its candid treatment of domestic abuse and marital breakdown could have made her deeply concerned for her and, of course, her family's reputation. Anne's careful foresight was well-founded. I mean, she was often right about the dangers posed by social judgment, and Charlotte had to carry the weight of knowing any slip could affect not just herself, but her sisters as well. What moves me most, though, is that even after all of this, even after being unmasked and celebrated, Charlotte still longed to be invisible. Not just modest, but truly private. She had tasted fame, yet she understood its cost, and in her heart, she seemed to value that quiet most of all, the freedom to live and write without the world watching. We had noticed how critics sometimes use their own chatters, put the quote in here. Bramwell Harrow, from further distress, given his but cutting condescension. Taken seriously as literal, not my literary voice, I can't even say it. Don't think this is going to work. I think we better move. Bit distracting. Thanks, Tree. When you step back and you look at the whole story, it is remarkable. I mean, the Bronte sisters became Currer, Ellis and Acton Bell, not because they wanted to deceive, but because they wanted their work to be taken seriously in a world that didn't value the voice of a woman in the same way as men. Each pseudonym was clever. I mean, it's keeping their own initial while dressing them in just enough masculine ambiguity to slip past the prejudice of the day. Genius. They guarded that secret fiercely, and for years it was theirs alone. I mean, imagine that determination it took to hold their ground, to send their work into the world under these invented names, and then to keep up the pretense even as success began knocking on their door. Eventually, they took that journey to London, revealing the truth only to their publisher. And yet, that anonymity that I can't say gave them a freedom that they might never have known otherwise. They could write without fear of being judged for their gender, yet it came at an emotional cost. Keeping that wall up must have been exhausting, and once the truth was out, they discovered how easily the world could let a writer's life overshadow their words. For me, the bravery lies not just in what they wrote, but in the fact that they kept speaking in their own way, even when the world wasn't ready to listen. Behind the bold names of Currer, Ellis and Acton Bell were three extraordinary women who dared to write the truth, and that is what makes their story so powerful. 3 questions for you this week. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Number 1, if the Brontes had used their real names, how do you think people would have reacted to their books back then? Number 2, which Bronte novel do you feel gives the clearest glimpse into the author's own life? And number 3, in this world where we all know everything, do you think you could get away with using a pseudonym? Let me know. Thank you, as always, for watching and for joining me on my little Bronte adventure. If you like this video, please do that whole likey, subscribey thing, because it really does help me out and it lets YouTube know that we want to watch more Bronte content. Have a good weekend, take care, and I will see you the Friday after next for more Bronte adventures. See you soon.